Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about generative AI and data management issues for unstructured data. There's a new report with stats about what's going on with unstructured data and generative AI, some really good stuff. To discuss that, I'm joined by Krishna Subramanian, president and co-founder of Komprise. Krishna, very good to have you with us today.
Thank you, James. Always a pleasure talking with you.
And I'm really glad that I used the phrase generative AI in the introduction, Krishna, because every interview these days has got to use the phrase generative AI. It's just necessary. There's no way around it.
Yeah, it's like a mantra. We all have to say it.
It is a mantra. You know what would help? I want to get you've got this really neat survey. I want to get into that. Could you give us kind of the 15-second version of what Komprise does? I know a lot of people are familiar with Komprise, but for those who aren't, what does Komprise do?
Yeah, so Komprise helps organizations deal with the explosion of unstructured data. And, unstructured data is basically any data that you cannot put into a spreadsheet or a database. So think of audio files, video files, log files, genomic files, seismic data, all of that is unstructured. Documents are unstructured. And so we provide a way to understand how much unstructured data you have across all your different storage and cloud environments, and then move the right data to the right place at the right time. And we index all the data so that you can search and find the data you need. So basically, that's data management.
Clearly there's a need for that. And it's also, when you think about data that companies find on social media networks, that tends to be unstructured, correct?
That's correct. Yep. Every X or tweet or whatever you want to call it now, it's unstructured. Yeah.
Right. All right. So there's a new report out, the Komprise 2023 State of Unstructured Data Management Survey. One of the quotes from the press release I thought was interesting. I'll read this back to you. I'd like to get your thoughts on this. So it's, quote, "As the generative AI marketplace expands and executives push for departments to leverage new solutions for competitive advantage, the need for an unstructured data governance agenda is strong." Why is this true in particular with the rise of Gen AI?
Yeah, James, maybe before I answer your question, if you're okay with it, I'll just highlight a few things so people know what this survey was about.
It's a really good idea. Let's do that. Please go ahead, Krishna.
Okay, so this is our third year of conducting a survey around unstructured data management, and so now we have data from 3 years that you can kind of look at the trends from, and we surveyed storage, IT, and storage executives. So basically, IT infrastructure managers who own the storage budget are the people we talk to, mostly in organizations. And what we found that's really interesting over the 3 years is that, we all know data growth is exploding, but we saw clear evidence of it because 75% of organizations this year told us that they are spending 30% or higher of their IT budget on storing and managing unstructured data. So that's a very high number.
Has that number, sorry to interrupt, is that number grown or is it?
It has grown. It has grown. So 75% is the highest, I think, over the 3 years. And 33% of the organizations that we surveyed said they're managing 10 petabytes or more of unstructured data. And that's a very large number. And so it's showing you how fast this data is growing. So those two things, coupled with this interest that businesses have in generative AI, means that IT departments are sort of facing this kind of two-pronged tension, if you will. On the one hand, they want to let their users take advantage of new technologies like generative AI. In fact, in our survey, 90% of respondents said that they do not want to restrict employee use of AI. So they want to put some guardrails, but they don't want to say, no, you cannot use it at all. They don't want to say that, right?
Yep.
So, but on the other hand, 67% of respondents said they're concerned about data governance and data privacy and security around AI. And all of them, I think, cost optimization and then preparing for data for AI were their top big priorities for the next year. So what we're really hearing, if you piece all this together, is storage managers are feeling the pressure. They know data is continuing to grow explosively. They know they have to feed data for AI for their business users, but they also know that they have to create some guardrails because they're really worried about governance.
You know, the number 90%, I'm almost surprised that 90% of the companies say we want our employees to be using generative AI. I mean, it seems,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, but of course you want them to get the advantage, but you want it to be properly governed. But you know that it's not properly governed yet. But you still 90% think you want your employees to get on board. I don't know. It's a little eager to me.
Well, here's the thing, right? Maybe it was how we asked the question. I'm not sure, but the 10% said we do not want our employees using AI until we figure all of this out.
Right.
So basically, you're kind of hearing 90% don't want to say an absolute no to their employees.
Okay.
So it's not that they don't want to put some guardrails. They just don't want to rule it out altogether.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, then back to that earlier point, the quote from the press release, it gets basically the question is the need for an unstructured governance agenda, unstructured data governance agenda is very strong in the world of generative AI. I think I know the answer, but explain to us, Krishna, please. Why is this true?
Yeah. So, if you think about it, most companies understand all the value generative AI can provide. And when it comes to data, there's really two areas of value that are pretty obvious. One is you have a lot of data sitting in a lot of places. And if you could have something look inside the contents and add metadata. So if something could look at all your photos and tell you, these are all the photos where James McGuire was interviewing one of our people. And these are all the photos, that have objectionable content. If something could already do all that for you and you could have that metadata, of course, it's easier to extract value from that data because now if you want to compile, a retrospective of all the interviews we've had, it's so easy because I could now just ask the tool to find things for me, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, so the use of AI when it comes to data is twofold. One is AI can be used to augment information about the data, which is usually called metadata. So AI can be used to augment metadata is the first use. The second use is that data then can be fed into AI for it to learn more from it. So can it do a better job of recognizing faces? Or can it do a better job of spotting fraud? Or can it actually do something, some processing for you that is usually tedious for humans to do, that a machine might be much better at doing, right? So those are the two use cases in most environments. And if you think about it, both of these use cases involve corporate data. And I think that's where companies are very concerned because once you take your corporate data and you give it to a process outside of the company, there's all kinds of questions about, did you give it the right data? Or did you expose sensitive data? Especially because some of this data could be customer data. Some of this data might have personally identifiable information, right? And then who owns it? So now that the AI has taken it, can it now learn from it and use it with other people? Can it use your data in its domain? Where's the lineage? So data governance covers security of data. It covers auditability of data. It covers lineage of data, all of those things. I think that was your question, James. I hope I answered it.
I think indeed you did. It was a tangled question, but I think you answered it, Krishna. And on that lineage piece, I think some of the companies are concerned because they think, well, is my data going to be used to train a large language model that is going to be sold widely? So suddenly, my proprietary data is out there in the marketplace. That's one of several worries out there.
Yes, and some of that can be handled through legal constructs. And in fact, you can see a lot of these LLM companies are now saying they will not use your corporate data in their training. They're adding APIs to prevent the use and all of that. So I think some of that may get sorted out just through better legal agreement. But I still think you will need to audit what goes where. You will need to track it, and you will need to control privacy. So there is a need for data governance, whenever you use AI.
You know, as a side point, you referred to large language model companies, and I want to be clear. Is there a lot? It's a brand new sector. It seems like some of the more established companies, some of the large cloud providers are offering LLMs. A number of known companies are. Is there a growing sector of companies that really their whole reason for being around is to sell large language models?
Well, I mean, there are companies that do LLMs like OpenAI, and then there
Right.
are companies, I think you saw Databricks actually acquired an LLM, and they plan to offer one. I think a lot of people are, like you said, Azure and AWS offer LLMs. So yes, there are businesses that are starting to offer LLMs, but we have to be clear, generative AI is larger than LLM, and AI is larger than generative AI. And so there's a lot of other things like image recognition, or there's predictive automation, which is also AI, but it's not generative. It's more predictive. So there's a lot of other things different vendors are offering in the landscape, all of which have data governance issues.
Great. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I want to get to the report, and I've got a number of bullet points. We can talk about them. You've talked about some of the things you found overall that are interesting about the report. Is there a point or two that you really want to highlight about the report?
Well, I think that the most interesting things were around cloud and AI. Cloud is interesting because last year when we surveyed, we found that most people wanted, cloud transformation was their number one priority. Cloud migrations was their number one priority.
In 2022? Sorry.
Yeah,
was there,
2022.
Okay. All right.
That's correct. And this year, cost optimization and AI are their top priorities. And I think if you look at the market, you can understand why. Because a lot of people initially thought, oh, I want to save costs. That means I need to turn off data centers and I just need to move everything to the cloud. I mean, that was sort of the prevalent thinking. I think now people have become more nuanced. They understand that even in the cloud, there are many tiers of service, and you have to optimize your cloud costs. And there's still data that's going to be hybrid. Sorry, I didn't do that. My phone rang.
We live in a data-rich world, as your phone just proved. We live in a data-rich world.
I thought I had it on me. Sorry, I hope that's not a problem.
No, not at all. No, it's good.
Should I just redo that full answer?
No, continue on with the point you were making. We're all good. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, sorry, to recall what I said. Yeah, the survey, cloud, it's not so much cloud migration anymore. It's more cost optimization across cloud and hybrid cloud. And definitely the next new thing is generative AI, or AI more broadly, and people are thinking about that. Those are the two interesting things from the survey. And there's a lot of detail around, the second order points behind those in the survey.
One of the points that I think is interesting, that this may relate to what you just said, is that the majority, 40%, will pursue a multi-pronged approach to manage AI risk, encompassing storage, data management, and security tools. So they do understand that it's not one thing. It's a holistic picture of managing AI risk. It's a complicated topic.
It really is. I think just as security has become sort of a feature of many products, I think the same is true for data governance. There's many aspects of governance, and data governance itself. There's a data layer to it. There's an application layer to it. There is a kind of a security angle to it and an infrastructure angle. So I think you will need an ecosystem of vendors providing data governance solutions.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, which seems like it never ends, is this bullet point. Organizations managing more than 10 petabytes of data grew from 27% to 32% this year, a 19% increase. So companies really managing a large reservoir of data, there are more and more companies doing that. I mean, so the need is just, it seems like data storage never goes the other way. It only gets greater and greater.
Yeah, I mean, and we can see that in our everyday lives, right? I mean, just look at every phone you buy and how many more cameras it has on it than the phone before, and that's evidence enough, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then you did reference this earlier. I think it's really fascinating. The nearly 3/4, 73%, are spending 30% or more of IT budget. We've talked about that one. That's on data storage and protection. That's huge. This is a good one. So the top unstructured data management challenge is moving data without disrupting users and applications. Follow closely by preparing for AI and cloud services. Okay, that's a super interesting point.
It is interesting because I think a lot of, I mean, it's easy to say a business needs to be agile and that they need to use data. In fact, interestingly, James, as our survey came out, IDC also put out a report on unstructured data management. And in their report, they said 58% of organizations, use data more than once, meaning that 42% of organizations only use the data they generate one time. And that's really sad because there's so much value in data, and people are keeping it around for a long time, but most don't know how to use it, right? And this point that you just made about the data volumes growing and needing a transparent way to move data, it goes to that the reason why data is dark. What happens is data gets trapped in silos. And when people move data from one silo to another, it's just trapped in another silo. And that's why IT recognizes that being able to look across all of them and to move data without disruption is really important to unlocking data value.
Well, I think it's exactly it. It's kind of an irony of data and data storage is that we have all this data, and the reality is that many times we're either not using it or using it just barely. So really the value of data is only just barely tapped.
Yes, that's correct. And if you think about it, AI needs this data for it to become more intelligent. So now you have a really good business reason why we should be unlocking data value.
Another bullet point from the survey, most 85% say that non-IT users should have a role in managing their own data. And 62% already have attained some level of user self-service for unstructured data management. I'm a little surprised at that one, and that the companies are saying that 85% of should say that non-IT users should have a role in managing their own data. I'm a little worried. I mean, are those staffers going to be able to manage their own data?
I think what you're seeing is this broader trend towards IT as a service. So what's happening is IT's role has changed a lot. They're no longer just managing infrastructure. They are actually trying to deliver a service that helps the business, which means that they are providing more self-service tools to their departments. And that's why you're seeing this move. What was surprising to me about that stat is that so many people are saying they already are doing it. And I think they're doing it in a very primitive way, frankly. Basically, they're giving departments some access to data, but not a lot. So I think we will see that becoming richer and richer as a service trend continues.
Interesting. All right, one last point from the report. Monitoring and alerting for capacity issues and anomalies led the pack for important future unstructured data management capabilities at 44%. So people want to know, we need to monitor what's going on. What is your take on that?
What's interesting is that, this one we know very well, but we can see something. Are you able to hear me okay?
I am. For a moment I couldn't, but you're back now. Yes.
Okay. So the reason for this is that people do get information about how much data storage is consumed or how much is available from each storage environment, but they're all siloed. So if you have some data in the cloud, some data on-premise, some data in different vendor storage, each one reports in a different way. And for IT, it is really difficult to reconcile all of this and to have one view of everything, and to just have that holistic single pane of glass of storage metrics. And that's what they're looking for.
Does that holistic pane of glass actually exist out there?
Yeah, Komprise actually provides a single view of data across all environments, and we're adding something called storage insights, which also gives you a single view of your storage across all environments. So you can get all of that in one place.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, data management is sort of the answer to that question.
So if you wrap it all up, Krishna, if you look at the report, what it means for companies, is there a piece of advice or so you'd say, be thinking about this as you move forward, as you want to improve your deployments? Here's a couple of things to think about. Here's something to get ready for. What advice, when you sum it all up, what advice might you give to companies?
I think the first thing is that you have to know what you're dealing with. So know first, I think, would be my advice still. Most people are still operating in the dark when it comes to their data. So the first thing you have to do is get a view of your data across all your silos, so you even know what problems to solve.
So really, you have to know what you're managing before you can properly manage it.
Yeah, that's exactly
it. That seems to be a fantastic first step. Any other last thought on that line?
Well, the other thing I'll say is, yes, the generative AI and AI overall is fast moving, but if you put the right guardrails in place, you can start playing with it, and you can start learning and provide a safe playground for your employees. So that would be the other thing. Take baby steps towards data governance.
Yeah, I think that would be a welcome piece of news for companies. As we've talked about, they do want their staffers using generative AI, but they want those guardrails, which makes sense. Yeah. Krishna, I think you said it. It's a lot of really fascinating stuff. It's going to be an interesting sector to follow in the years ahead. Thanks for sharing your insight, and please do come back and talk with us again sometime.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me.